Salutations! We finally got to see new campaign gameplay footage for Halo Infinite after 15 whole months, and there's quite a lot to digest from the new trailer. As a Halo fan who's primarily into the single player campaigns, I was heavily anticipating this moment. This is going to be the one portion of the game that'll cost money, and I needed to know what the gameplay loop was going to look like. And this trailer definitely shows that with a lengthy, information-packed trailer. I'll go over my thoughts on what was shown in the trailer, talking about what I liked as well as some concerns that I have. This video will also serve as part 2 of my thoughts on the second Halo Infinite tech preview that took place a little while ago. So after I'm done talking about the campaign footage, I'll jump straight to the multiplayer section. With that said, let's begin. The trailer showcased a solid balance of story and gameplay sequences that demonstrate the loop players will go through in Halo Infinite's campaign. I just want to point out that the graphics compared to last year's demo are light years ahead in terms of fidelity. Just look at this segment that took place during last year's demo. Even the hexagonal pillars that I thought didn't look very good before look way better now and actually fit the environments they're located in. Other great examples are these stills that we saw from the Discover Hope trailer back in 2019. Much more detail was added to these scenes, especially Master Chief's armor, which looks much more battle-scarred and not as plasticky. Even the pilot seemed to have gotten an updated model in between these showcases, and looks much better overall. Many of the enemies, especially the brutes, look way better than it did last year. We also got our first look at the hunters, and they look gorgeous. It's the Halo 5 design, but has a color palette that's heavily inspired by the Combat Evolved rendition. I really dig it. We got to see more of the weapon in the trailer, and she's shown to be adorably naive about many of the situations she happens to be in with Chief. And Purple Cortana from the first 2 games has finally made a return. Along with the returning favorites, we have some new faces. A new enemy type appears in the form of the Skimmers. Not much can really be said about them because we don't really see them in action, but it appears as if they will be taking the fast but frail airborne unit role like the drones and Watchers have in the past. Jaga Erdamnai is another new character introduced into Halo Infinite, and he's advertised as being a Spartan killer. I'm hoping this guy is a recurring boss and not just a one and done encounter, because he just looks like a really fun opponent. Lastly, making her debut in this trailer is the Harbinger. We don't really know anything about her just yet, whether she's Forerunner, Sanchayum, or whatever else, but hopefully she too will make for a compelling boss fight. Halo Infinite is definitely taking the concept of a sandbox game and kicking it to overdrive. Like with many other open world FPS games, the player is tasked to take on a wide range of enemy fortifications, whether they're prison camps, mining facilities, or places with other purposes. The player has the freedom to tackle these objectives in just about any way they choose, whether it's getting up close and personal, sniping from a distance, or steamrolling with vehicles. Captured prisoners can even hitch a ride in the vehicles you drive. One of the examples that was shown of a base assault quest is Ransom Keep. Chief is tasked with destroying a number of silos, which will halt the banished resource production of this site, and he can complete the objective in a number of different ways. Boss fights are shown off in this trailer as well, with the 2 brutes utilizing human weapons instead of their typical banished gear. This is a neat callback to the days of Halo 2, when brutes wielded shotguns on various levels. However, I am a bit skeptical on the idea of giving brutes ballistic weaponry that have fast projectile speeds such as the Commando. Hopefully, AI-held human weapons have modifiers given to their projectiles that make them more dodgeable, or at the very least, they shouldn't be firing them that often. What made the alien factions in the Halo series so fun to fight was largely in part of their weapons not firing fast projectiles, and when the player got hit by too many of them, that was a fault of the player's poor positioning. Whenever the game had the player go up against human weapons or fast-traveling projectiles, which included Flood combat forms or Jackal snipers, they were mostly considered to be some of the series' lower points. Another thing people are talking about regarding bosses is the health bar. I get why people are upset about this inclusion, but I personally don't mind them all that much. I'm kind of neutral on the position and could live with or without it. A concern that I do have is the likeliness of a lot of these bosses to be copy-pasted throughout the environments in terms of design. I prefer if each of these bosses were unique in their own way outside of their given names. Returning from the 2020 showcase is the TAC map, and received a massive overhaul since last year. The visuals on the map are actually multicolored instead of exclusively being shades of blue, allowing users to accurately make out where everything is. 2 new options at the top were added: in the form of FOB, which stands for Forward Operating Base, and targets, which are likely either bosses or high-value locations. FOBs are particularly notable because they serve as small outposts for the player to obtain weapons, weapon variants, and vehicles of their choosing. I said this a while ago, but I hope to see UNSC weapon variants with suppressors, optics, and other modifications become available in this game. Another new element that was added to the attack map from the 2020 trailer is the collectibles box, which shows you how many of each type of Easter egg or other types of hidden items you found, and I'm glad to see that skulls seem to be making a return. We also get a brief glimpse of the upgrade screen, and we finally know what it's for. The player can spend Spartan cores, which are the game's form of currency for this system, to enhance the capabilities of the equipment items like grapple shot, overshield, and thruster. Some of the upgrades that were shown in this trailer include an electric upgrade to the grapple shot that stun locks opponents when they're skewered by it, as well as an active camouflage perk for the thruster pack. The template these equipment upgrades seem to be following is that the first 3 upgrades offer more basic perks, such as faster cooldowns, stronger power output, etc., while the last upgrade in the row offers a special perk like the aforementioned camo bonus for the thruster pack, which in this case is called Escape Velocity. Honestly, what I'm most excited for with the Infinite campaign is being able to fly in these massively open environments. Air vehicles have always been among my favorite to use in the series, with the best for me still being the Combat Evolved Banshee. The ceiling for the open world looks astronomically high. So high in fact, that when the player performs this Rendezook against a Banshee, which in itself is a nice Battlefield reference, the player is able to see the blackness of space outside of the atmosphere of the ring. I can't wait to just spend hours mindlessly flying around Zeta Halo as a means to relax. With all this said, my feelings about the campaign are fairly positive, and I feel as long as there's a lot of varied content that'll keep the player interested, this could probably be one of the best campaigns in the series. I'm just nervous that there might be a degree of repetition that a lot of open world games tend to have that'll sour the experience for me at times. I already mentioned the potential of repetitive boss battles, but there's also copy-paste encounters as well. Halo's no stranger to repetitive level design, especially in Combat Evolved, and while CE still has my favorite campaign in the series, the existence of a ton of copy-paste rooms was a fair critique. I'm also hoping there's plenty to see and do in the open world environments, and that they aren't too empty and lifeless. There were moments in the trailer that showed off some ambient wildlife in the form of bird flocks, so that leaves me a bit hopeful on that front. Overall, I feel way more optimistic coming out of that showcase, and thankfully we got to see what we did. The campaign's looking amazing. It's just a shame co-op won't be there for it at launch. It would have been a wonderful experience seeing what the campaign has to offer for the first time with friends. Hopefully, when co-op does release in the second season, something new gets introduced to keep the campaign fresh. The second weekend for the Halo Infinite Tech preview happened last month, with the main focus being the newest rendition of Big Team Battle. I'll be going over my thoughts and opinions on the content featured in the Big Team Battle portion of the preview, some things I missed or got wrong in the previous part, and things I newly discovered in the most recent flighting period. Again, there's going to be some spoiler talk in regards to new vehicles and a new weapon I got to try out, so if you don't want to be spoiled by them, I'll put up a timestamp on screen for you to avoid them. Before I get into the Big Team Battle coverage for this video, I'd like to take a step back and cover some of the content I missed and got wrong in the first tech preview video that I made. For starters, I completely forgot to talk about 2 of the weapons. First is the sniper rifle. It's a pretty strange iteration to be frank. While it mostly works like the majority of the sniper rifles throughout the series, the main difference here is the notoriously high spread when going for no-scopes. The one no-scope I did get during this behemoth match must have been super lucky, because even when firing the first shot, the round placement is randomized. I'd greatly prefer no spread on this weapon at all, but if we absolutely had to have a large amount of spread when unzoomed, I recommend having the first shot be dead on, followed by any consecutive rounds becoming random when you spam the trigger. It's also strange because when scoped in, there's no spread at all. The Infinite Sniper Rifle is also hella strong against vehicles. I was never a fan of this when it became a feature with snipers starting with Reach, as it becomes a hit-scan anti-vehicle weapon like the Spartan laser. And I know the lore enthusiasts are going to defend this by saying, well, it's an anti-material rifle, of course it should kill vehicles easily. And to that I say gameplay takes precedent over lore. If Halo Wars 1 can have Mark IV Spartans with energy shields, the sniper doesn't have to be good at dishing out dummy high damage to vehicles. Let weapons like the rocket, skewer, and other explosives fill that role instead. The other weapon I somehow forgot to talk about was the rocket launcher, and in this game it's a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, it's one of the deadliest rocket launchers ever seen in a 4v4 environment, dishing out incredibly high amounts of splash damage with its area of effect radius. However, the same cannot be said about its performance in BTB, where the rockets are strangely very weak against vehicle armor. It should insta-kill smaller vehicles such as the Mongoose, Ghost, and Wasp, while Warthog should require just 2 to kill the vehicle. It seems like the game's pushing for the Skewer to be the primary vehicle killer, while the Spanker plays a more anti-infantry role. While I see the intention, I firmly believe the rockets should still be dishing out good vehicle damage regardless, just out of principle. When I think of a weapon that kills vehicles good, I think of the Spanker. In part 1, I talked about how the Cinder Shot was supposedly the very first laser-guided weapon in the series, but I completely forgot about Halo 5's Ad Victoriam variant of the rocket launcher, which has the exact same functionality. The feature wasn't part of the original variant's gameplay design, so to be a little haughty, I'm still partially right regarding the fact the Cinder Shot itself was specifically designed to have a laser-guided firing mode from the start, and is the first standard Halo weapon to have this feature. Before Halo Infinite, the concept of the phrase Big Team Battle simply referred to a style of Halo multiplayer matches that featured more players in a match than what was seen in a typical lobby. Instead of 8 players, it'd be anywhere from 12 to 16. And matches were typically played on some of the larger maps that were available on the map roster, and vehicles were typically part of this equation. However, at their core, Big Team Battle matches weren't fundamentally different from your standard 4v4 Halo match besides the player count. Halo Infinite takes the concept of BTB down a completely different path, however. Instead of matches simply being Slayer or Capture the Flag but with higher player counts, Halo Infinite's Big Team Battle is a brand new experience that's almost separate from the game's more conventional multiplayer offerings. If all of this sounds familiar, it's because Halo 5's Warzone mode was similarly a standalone feature that was pseudo-separate from the standard multiplayer experience. The one available BTB map in the flight was Fragmentation, which was developed by Cliff Schultz. Here's his Twitter, give him a follow for me. I gotta say, Fragmentation is a beautiful map, and the pacing and flow of the map are equally as polished. It's definitely a larger map, but there's plenty of ways for on-foot players to get around the map safely, and that's always something I'm looking for within BTB maps. And surprisingly, Assault Rifle and Sidekick starts is what made this set of BTB matches work so well for me. Unlike the Assault Rifles from Halos 3 and Reach, the Halo Infinite rendition is capable of suppressing enemies using battle rifles and commandos from a distance fairly well. Not only that, everyone isn't constantly getting lasered by precision weapon shots, and people can actually move from one place to another consistently without much stress. I hope that AR starts as the standard mode for BTB when the game finally releases in less than 2 months. Other weapons and equipment got to shine much more in BTB than they did in 4v4s, with a prime example being the Ravager. This was honestly one of my go-to map pickups during my time on the flight, as not only did it dish out good amounts of AoE damage against infantry, but it was also powerful against vehicles, being great at stripping their health while other teammates aid in taking them down with you. The weapon that really came into its own here was a Skewer. I did terribly with this thing during the 4v4 sessions, but being able to use it within its intended primary role as an anti-vehicle weapon was a great change of pace. Another thing I really liked were the loot caves. They effectively served as mini objectives for both teams, which helped turn the tide of the match, and seeing your rewards waiting inside is a hype feeling. That being said, I did find the act of activating the door hack a bit finicky and inconsistent. Sometimes I walked to the podium while holding down the action button, and it wouldn't start the hack right away, and I'd have to press the action key again. Still, this is a neat feature overall, and I hope more of these appear in other maps. Next, let me talk about the vehicles. The Warthog, Ghost, and Mongoose make a return from Behemoth, but we also got the chance to use 3 new ones in the forms of the Banshee, Wasp, and Scorpion. With the way the map is designed, as well as regarding what's available in the overall sandbox, vehicles didn't feel like a dominating force in BTB, but when the conditions were right, they put in work. The Ghost was just as powerful as it was on Behemoth, the Mongoose was just as awkward to drive from the previous fighting session, and the Warthog was incredibly satisfying to not only drive, but get kills with on the turret. As for the other vehicles, let's start with the Banshee. I didn't perform well with this vehicle. It felt as if its flying mechanics didn't lend itself well with the map geometry. There's not a lot of open airspace near the center parts of the map, which is where most of the encounters took place, and this I felt hurt the Banshee's performance. It requires the pilot to adequately angle themselves in a way that'll reward kills, but with dense jungle and tight canyons being primary features in the map's layout, the Banshee really struggled for me here. I can't say the same thing about the Wasp, however. Fragmentation practically felt designed for the Wasp in mind. Unlike the Banshee, strafing runs aren't required for the Wasp to get kills, and pilots are able to hover in place and take out enemies from safe distances. The controls are also super tight and lend themselves well with the map's tighter airspaces, allowing for the vehicle to bob and weave from enemy gunfire quite effectively. I went on absolute tears with this vehicle whenever I managed to get into it. Lastly is the Scorpion. It's definitely a vehicle that requires team coordination to secure when it's dropped in, as it's easily overwhelmed when multiple enemies are converging on your position. That being said, the Scorpion is your typical Scorpion. Strong, durable, and satisfying to fire. I just wish it appeared more frequently in these matches. I'll talk a bit more about that later. There were 3 available game modes in BTB: Slayer, Capture the Flag, and a brand new game mode, Total Control. Total Control is a new rendition of Strongholds. For teams to score points, all 3 points have to be locked in for any one team, and when that team manages to secure all 3 objectives, the hills disappear and are replaced with 3 new ones spawned in different locations. It's a highly teamwork-centric game mode and is best played when communicating with your teammates. Capture the Flag is just like your typical CTF game, but there's a twist. When a flag is taken and successfully brought home to be scored, the team that lost the flag to the enemy will have theirs respawn at a different location. I wasn't a fan of it at first because initially I thought the locations were randomized, but it turns out that the flag spawns are in a consistent order, getting put in progressively more difficult areas the more times the flag is captured. I actually really like this, as it forces flag runners and other teammates to change up their strategy with each cap, and runners get to experience different flag runs with each subsequent capture, keeping the mode feeling fresh for the entire game. Lastly, there was Slayer, which I felt could have had a limit of 150 kills at the very least instead of 100. 100 kill limit matches felt a bit too fast given the higher player count of 24 total. The last thing I really liked about BTB were the fusion coils. They're hard to get kills with, but good lord, it's the most satisfying feeling when you get one. Hopefully they appear in more BTB maps as well as 4v4 maps as well. I haven't had this much fun playing Halo BTB since Halo 3, but there are a few issues I had with this mode that hold it back in certain areas. There's a reason why I mentioned Halo 3 as being one of the last BTB games I enjoyed in Halo, and that's because Halo 3 doesn't use the vehicle health system that's been adopted since Halo Reach. It's one of the main reasons vehicles have become harder and harder to use as the series progressed, and it doesn't help that Halo Infinite has introduced a plethora of counterplay against them. I've already talked about the skewer, but there's also the sniper rifle. There's also the electric type weaponry that are capable of EMPing vehicles. The shock rifle and disruptor, although the latter wasn't available in BTB, could disable a vehicle after a certain number of projectiles land on the target, while the dynamo grenades instantly EMP a vehicle upon making direct contact within its AoE. I highly disagree with how easy it is to stop vehicles with the dynamo nades. They're effectively Halo 3's power drain in grenade form, and their spawn timer is ridiculously fast. In my opinion, it should EMP after a vehicle has received a certain amount of electricity, much like with the other 2 shock weapons. This not only keeps consistency with its relatives, but it also won't make dynamo nades a near brainless countermeasure against vehicles, making the user choose their toss locations carefully to get the most out of their nades. I also have issues with the vehicle drop mechanic with the Pelicans. My biggest problem with it is the random element that chooses which vehicle comes in. I don't agree with the fact that it should drop off any vehicles that already spawn at the bases, which in this case is the Warthog. In fact, only the Ghost and Warthog ever show up in these drops in Slayer matches, with the other vehicles being locked to objective game modes. It was considerably hard to gather footage of some of the rarer vehicles, especially the Scorpion. Not only that, I kinda felt dirty waiting for some of these vehicles to spawn and immediately take them because I wanted to be able to let my teammates use them considering how rare they are, and it was only fair that everyone got a chance to use them within the limited time of this flight. In short, the Pelicans should only drop vehicles that don't spawn at the base, which would allow some of the more sought after vehicles to have a better chance at appearing. Scorpions, and I assume the Wraith in the final game as well, only really start to make appearances in the match towards the end. Perhaps make them more common around the exact halfway point of a match. Heavy vehicles are a part of what makes BTB special, and I hate to see them used so seldomly. Another huge problem I had with BTB, and many have said this already, is the lack of Jeff Steitzer. In his place is the new Spartan character Commander Lorette Agrinia, which will inform you about certain events such as Pelicans coming in, flags being taken, etc. I think she's actually a really cool addition to the universe and I digged her trailer. However, not having Jeff take part at all in BTB sessions is a tad extreme. I'd prefer it if Jeff and Lorette coexisted with each other. Having Jeff read off multi-kills, flag caps, total control scores, etc., while Lorette informs me about everything else. Let my man Jeff shine while we still have him. He's been the voice of Halo for 20 years now, and it just feels wrong not hearing my multi-kills read off by him. Please bring Jeff Steitzer back for BTB. Please, pretty please. Some of the other weapons we got access to in the BTB flight were underwhelming. I already mentioned earlier in the video about how the rocket launcher of all things is extremely weak against vehicles, but there's also the machine gun turret, and once again, it slows you way the hell down in a game as highly mobile as Halo Infinite. With everyone sprinting, grapple shotting, making bounces with a repulsor, and driving in fast vehicles, I don't understand why we still have our Spartans slowed down this much when holding the turret. I'd buff the walking speed by a hair to allow this weapon to viably compete on the battlefield. Lastly, we have the plasma pistol, which still didn't have access to its EMP ability. I did say how there's already a ton of counterplay against vehicles, but that begs the question, why is the plasma pistol even here then? What is it supposed to do in a BTB environment that isn't done better by the pulse carbine? Honestly, the plasma pistol spawn should have been disruptor spawns instead. Alright, here's the spoiler warning. The next chapter in this video will be about more content that wasn't normally accessible in matchmaking, so skip to this part in the video here to avoid these spoilers if you want. You have a few seconds to decide. Like with the previous video, I was able to access some more unused content within the flight, including one new weapon, a few vehicles, and a piece of equipment. I'll start with the new weapon, the Stalker Rifle. For those who prefer their precision weapons to be like the DMR and Needle Rifle, this is the weapon for you. It's a battery-operated marksman rifle that overheats when spamming the trigger. It's pretty strong when you land each of your shots, killing a player in 3 headshots, much like the Mangler. I do find this weapon to be a bit plain compared to the rest of the banished weapons, and the Mangler is a much more interesting 3-shot kill weapon, at least in my opinion. Also, I find it kind of funny how everyone on Twitter is memeing about the Jackal snipers returning and how much of a threat they're going to be, but considering that the Stalker Rifle is likely not going to be an insta-kill weapon in the hands of the AI, I don't think there'll be too much of a problem. Moving on, there were 4 unused vehicles that I'm surprised at the fact they weren't utilized for BTB. First up is the Gungoose, returning from Halo 5. I think I understand why the Mongoose in general has such tight handling now in Halo Infinite. It's for the Gungoose aiming controls. It's pretty powerful in this game, and with how responsive the aiming mechanics were, I could see this performing well in PvP. Next up is the fan favorite Brute Chopper. I love the design. It looks mean as hell, and I love the way the wheels are animated when driving around. It even has a display for the driver that shows the vehicle's weaponry and what I'm assuming to be the health status on the right. The chopper is a bit of a disappointment everywhere else, however. The spike cannons felt noticeably weak and don't seem to have nearly as much of an impact against players and other objects as the Halo 3 choppers. It was also noticeably frail in this build, feeling about as durable as the Ghost, and was dispatched by small arms fire fairly quickly. Unlike in Halo 3, you can't spam the trigger to shoot extra shots anymore, and attempting to do it in Halo Infinite will actually slow your fire rate. Lastly, vehicle ramming with the chopper is extremely underwhelming compared to Halo 3's. It takes about 3 direct hits to destroy a Warthog, and because of the new Doomsday mechanic, the rammed vehicle won't blow up immediately after getting hit. There is one notable advantage the Infinite Chopper has over its Halo 3 counterpart though. You can now control how much boost a chopper can use, just like with many of the other Covenant vehicles from Halo Reach and onwards. I do understand that we weren't meant to see the chopper just yet, but it needs some serious buffs. Next up is the Razorback. There's not much to really say about it other than that it's a new rendition of the Troop Transport Warthog that can actually house 2 extra passengers on the back. It was advertised that players can store weapons and objectives on the back of the vehicle, but it didn't seem to work in this build, likely because it requires the driver to be inside the vehicle before anyone can place an object on it. Finally, there's the Wraith, and I'm honestly not a fan of what I saw. The design is looking like it's mixing design elements from the Halo Reach and Halo 5 designs, and it just looks rotund overall, especially in the rear. The projectile effects for the mortars are extremely muted and dull, making the mortar hard to see from not even that far away. Compare this to Halo 3's mortar effects, which look bright, juicy, and full of life. I don't know how I'm expected to see incoming Wraith mortars from further distances when there's barely any visible effects playing on them. At least the turret is shielded just like the anti-air Wraiths in Halo 5, and it no longer overheats like the rest of the turret weapons in Infinite. Salutations, postscript writing Vadam here. I forgot to mention a 5th vehicle that I got to use, the Rocket Warthog. It's using the same turret design as it has been since Halo Reach, but it no longer shoots a 6 rocket burst. Instead, it's a slow-firing full auto weapon. It's noticeably weak against other players, but I suspect this is for balancing reasons. I'm also predicting that this will be able to lock onto vehicles, but there was no real way to test this theory without other human players. The last thing I want to cover for this video is Thruster, a relatively unused equipment piece. It's basically an upgraded version of Halo 5's Thruster Pack, propelling the user slightly further than Halo 5's while stopping the player in its tracks upon landing. Seeing it being used as an equipment item instead of being a Spartan ability is really nice to see, although you can totally make a Halo 5 style game mode where everyone has unlimited Thruster Pack usage. And that's going to be it for this video. BTB has definitely improved my perception of Halo Infinite way more than the previous fight already did. Something about Infinite's BTB just feels so right, even though there's a few things here and there that I felt could be improved upon. The campaign is also looking really good and I can't wait to play that. December 8th really can't come soon enough. If, and only if, you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, turn on notifications to see when I'm uploading, and subscribe for more Halo content on this channel. Make sure to follow me on Twitter to see any updates regarding whatever I'm doing. Join my Discord server, and keep an eye out for future live streams here on YouTube. I also have a Patreon page where you can voluntarily donate to further support my channel. I'd like to take this time to thank my Sangheli Zealots, as well as counselors Lauren Kleckner, Mickey Chief, and Kyle Dealman for their patronage. This is the Vengeful Vadam, and I'll see you on the great journey.